Welcome to part 2 of the Believe Fantasy Football Show, early free agency reaction show. It's been a heck of a couple first few days of free agency, the early negotiating period, giving us a lot to talk about here. Lindsay Rhodes with Michael Fabiano, and we already talked about some of the big moves, including Saquon Barkley to the Eagles. What do we think about Saquon's replacement at the Giants, Singletary? See, I know that Giants fans are kind of freaking out. I've seen some Giants fans actually, tweet at him somewhat angrily as if it's his fault that he went to the rivals.
Your franchise freaked up. You gave Daniel Jones all that money. Well, because I want to swear and I can't. I don't want to swear because if I start swearing, then I'm going to start just swearing and swear when I'm not supposed to swear. So your stupid team gave Daniel Jones a bunch of money and franchised Barkley when you could have franchised Jones and then signed Saquon. And you gave Saquon very little to play with in the offense. You know, his best receivers were 3s and 4s. Darren Waller didn't do anything last year. The offensive line stunk. If I was Saquon Barkley and the Eagles, who are a Super Bowl contender, came at me with that money, with that offensive line and that offense, hell yeah, I'm leaving. Like, don't blame Saquon Barkley. The Eagles just happen to be a rival. The Giants gave your guy a better deal. And you know what? It's better in fantasy as well. It's just like the Cowboys, right? Yeah, Tony Pollard's gone. All right. Well, hey, you know what? It is what it is. He got a good deal with Tennessee. God bless him. Saquon Barkley, and he had that whole thing with like Tiki Barber as well. I don't know if Tiki was like tongue in cheek saying, that he's dead to me or whatever. I have no idea. But Saquon Barkley did not get what he deserved in New York in terms of support. And now he's in Philadelphia. And now we're going to see if Saquon Barkley can be that same stud that he was as a rookie in New York.
Look, I think that the Giants had a good first day. And I know that, again, Giants fans feel like I saw somebody that I'm friends with that was like, this is my nightmare when Saquon was leaving. Now we're in a full rebuild. I don't see it that way. But also, I guess, if you are rebuilding, you kind of were anyway. And you just now are doing it without this guy who has been the face of the franchise, but at a lower premium position. Like, you can't afford to be like, hey, we're going to start all of our big money moves. We're going to allocate more than the average money at running back when we have so many holes everywhere else. I think that this was a smart approach to rip that Band-Aid off, go with Singletary, who proved last year on a good offense that he could have success. Now, will this be a good offense? Will he have a quarterback that can keep defenses honest and kind of free up things up for him? Will he have an offensive line? That remains to be seen, but I think that it's good that they are saying we are not a team that can afford to go all in on the running back position of all things. We need to spend our money on Brian Burns, who, by the way, like, great move for them. They give up a 2 and a 5, and then they obviously pay him a ton of money.
The Panthers, by the way, are the worst trading team, I think, ever. They didn't get a 1 for Christian McCaffrey. They didn't get a 1 for Burns, and they gave up a boatload for Bryce Young, who looked awful last season. Now, maybe it's not his fault. But I'm sorry, I'm just checking X right now, and there's a report that it's down to the Jaguars and Patriots for Calvin Ridley. So we'll find out, because we haven't had a lot of wide receivers, change teams. Evans stood still, and he's in Tampa Bay, and then Gabe Davis went to Jacksonville. But I don't know why Jacksonville would sign him if they were thinking of bringing back Ridley. Anyways, we'll find out about that.
Mooney to Atlanta
in the hours and days to come. But the bottom line here for the Giants, I think they're going to draft a running back, because Matt Breida is a free agent. They don't have anybody else but Gary Brightwell. So forget about that. And Singletary knows the offense because he played with Dayball in Buffalo. So that's a good thing. But at the end of the day, Singletary's rarely been like a featured back. And if he is the starter and he's the lead guy, say the Giants don't go after a running back in the draft, which I would kind of be surprised if they didn't, then, he could have some flex value potentially next season.
Well, the thing about, like, so, Saquon, for instance, I read last week off a bunch of stats of his from last year, and you, I think, rightly pointed out that all of these negative stats are what he looks like on a team that doesn't have anything around him. So, just to reiterate, last year, his EPA per rush was the 6th worst amongst qualifying running backs. His tackle for loss rate was 2nd worst out of 62 running backs. He was tackled for a loss on 15.2% of his runs. 7.4% explosive run rate, that ranked 20th Again, so he had a rushing yards over expectation per attempt that was positive in the 13th. He was 13th at running back. So, but all of these stats, like you said, are without a good offensive line, without a good quarterback, without any good wide receivers. Like, why would you invest? Why would you put the money there before you? Because we just saw what it looks like if you can't upgrade those other positions, what Saquon brings to the table. And that's not the best version of Saquon. So if you can't provide the best version of Saquon with the pieces that you have, then you have to let him go and let somebody else pay him top dollar because you're not getting a return on that investment. So
Saquon,
I think it's a very smart move that they said, we're going to go get a running back that what we've seen is that he's good enough as long as we upgrade our offensive line and the pieces around him. And then it allows them more resources to do those things. And so I think that this is a smart approach, that they know who they are. And you have to get better at the premium positions if you're going to be competitive, because having one of the best running backs in the NFL, if that's who Saquon still is, that did nothing for them last year.
Yep. And also,
so let him go.
Another stat too is that among running backs who had at least 200 carries last year, Saquon saw 8 men in the box or more, the seventh most among running backs.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
Yeah.
Not. You're not getting your money's worth if you're paying him and you're not upgrading the team around him. The Eagles, though, I agree with you. I like his fantasy value, and I think that he will look better in real life on the Eagles, but I am a little bit concerned about the volume. Like, this is a mouths to feed offense, right? But I guess if we break that down, then
remember,
you could look at Christian McCaffrey in San Francisco, who clearly there's tons of mouths to feed there, and that never hurt him from a fantasy standpoint.
Swift is gone, obviously. Rashad Penny's a free agent, so he's probably gone.
Oh, I'm not talking about running back mouths to feed. I'm just saying the ball's going to be distributed. Like, they're still going to throw the ball to A.J. Brown. They're still going to throw the ball to Devontae Smith. They still have Dallas Goedert. Like, you've got a lot of high-end assets, right? So you're going to be balanced. Jalen Hurts is going to still run the ball. And I've heard people calling for him not to run the ball. I think, then why do you have Jalen Hurts? Like, that's part of his value. I think that was part of their offensive problem last year, was that I think he was hurt. I think he wasn't himself. Yeah. And so they were continuing to call plays as if he was a running quarterback, and he wasn't really a running quarterback physically at that stage of the game. So I think you can, assuming that that's the case, and that's what we were looking at, then I think you got to continue to call those rushing plays. I wonder if they'll be doing that. Oh my gosh, why am I blanking about what the name for their push?
Just push.
Yes. Okay.
Brotherly shove.
Brotherly shove. That's what it was. I wonder how much they'll still do that.
Well, when they get down to the goal line, I'm sure they'll still do that because it's an effective.
They don't have Kelsey
for them.
Kelsey, everyone said last year was the key to that play. And that's the only other thing that's the only other point that I wanted to make, is that everybody was putting out DeAndre Swift's, like, how frequently he was touched by a defender behind the line of scrimmage last year, which was infrequently, which is a sign about the offensive line play, right? Versus Saquon Barkley. And I mentioned the tackled for loss. Clearly, like, defenses were right through the line and up in his grill the second that the ball was snapped. But in this particular case with the Eagles, it's worth noting that that offensive line that was their offensive line last year is not back. There are going to be some new pieces on that offensive line with a couple of different people checking out. So I think it'll still be a massive upgrade from New York, but it's not exactly the same.
Right. Last year, Swift averaged about 14 carries a game and about 17 touches a game. Saquon will average more than that. No, I wouldn't say significantly more than that, but he'll average more than that. Swift was averaging about 14 points per game. So I think you can add at least 3 points per game on Saquon. So give him, 17, 18 points per game. I think you can safely assume that he'll do that. And then also, keep in mind that when Kellen Moore had Zeke and Zeke was, in his prime, Zeke was he was the dude, man. Like, that guy, he was Gucci, right? I mean, he was getting all the touch. I had to throw it in there. It was a good spot. It was a good spot. Yes, it was. So he has been in an offense where he has had a bell cow, and now he does have a bell cow. And I think Barkley is going to be fantastic in Philadelphia. I hate it because I'm a Cowboys fan, but the Eagles get, the better of the Cowboys again. Now, when we talk about Swift going to Chicago, I think that's a lateral move. I don't think that's like, oh, this is great for his fantasy value, because Lindsay, there are better running backs in Chicago to compete with than he had in Philadelphia, right? I like Ken Gainwell and all that. Boston Scott, meh, right? But like if he wasn't playing the Giants, he didn't do anything. But now you got Roschon Johnson in his second year, and you got Khalil Herbert, who I know you always love to talk about the stats and some of these funky analytics, and Khalil Herbert actually did pretty well in some of those categories, right? So I don't see this as DeAndre Swift's going to, I think DeAndre Swift's going to be the same kind of guy. He'll be an RB2. He'll be relatively consistent, but there's going to be games where, Roschon pops or, Khalil Herbert pops. That's a pretty good backfield, right? There's some talent in that backfield. So I don't necessarily think that DeAndre Swift going to Chicago is a great thing. I kind of think it's a lateral move, and he's still an RB2.
Yeah, and are we done with Roschon? Like what?
I mean, I don't know if I'm done with Roschon, but I tell you, I have him in Dynasty. Me and you made a trade in the Dynasty League, and I was hoping that Roschon would take over the job this year, and that was a bit of kick in the nuts. So, and one thing we haven't talked about, Lindsay, yet. One thing we haven't talked about. Let's stick with the Bears real quick.
Okay.
What the hell happened to Justin Fields' trade market?
I don't know, man.
I was having arguments with people on Twitter, and I must be stupid. And fantasy is different than reality. And Justin Fields is a very good fantasy quarterback, but a guy who's in his early 20s to mid 20s, who hasn't hit his prime, who has had to have, this would be his third offensive coordinator in 4 years now with Shane Waldron, who's had a crappy offensive line, not great weapons around him for most of his career. I get it. He's not like the best passer in the world. He ain't Peyton Manning, but he's still a playmaker. And I feel like, why the hell would the Raiders not go after him instead of signing Gardner Minshew? And I was doing this, and then I got a text from a good friend of mine who used to be a GM in the NFL, and he's like, Fabs, the market for Fields is garbage, and the Bears would be lucky to get a 5th round pick for him. I'm thinking to myself, Mac Jones went to Jacksonville for a 6th, and Fields you can't get more than a 5th, and now the Bears, both from a real and a fantasy perspective, are kind of in between a rock and a hard place, right? Yep. Because you want Caleb Williams. You can't have Caleb Williams and Justin Fields on the same team. There's no freaking way you can do that going into camp.
Oh my God, especially with the fan base, because the fan base there in Chicago, outside Chicago, we're having this conversation one way. Within Chicago, I mean, you've got a 50-50 split. This is a powder keg amongst the fans. There are people there who are hardcore. I want Justin Fields to remain our quarterback. I tend to agree that that's a rough situation to put both of them in the same quarterback room, but you got to get something in return for Justin Fields. And I am on the same page with you, where I'm just shocked that somebody wouldn't take a bet on the upside, because at quarterback, we talk about this all the time. You take swings at quarterback, you can take a risk at quarterback, because if it pays off, then you have not the only thing that you need, but if you don't have one, you have nothing. All the rest of the stuff doesn't matter, i.e. Atlanta, right? Go get a tight end at number 4 and then go get Bijan. You can't do it unless you have a quarterback to pull the pieces together. And to me, he has certain aspects of his game that he's elite at. The stuff on the ground is mobility, kind of Lamar-ish, right? So we need to develop the passing game, but I'm shocked that no one's interested in biting on that, especially if the price is low.
Yeah.
If we're actually looking at because they had to have known. We've heard this for weeks from people saying the market for Justin Fields is not what you guys think. It's not a robust market. All the insiders have been saying that. Okay, so that being true, I would assume that the Bears understood that. So the Bears, if you got offered what you think is actually probably the best case scenario, what you're going to get, go take it. But all these jobs are getting, I don't know if there's a landing spot even left.
Right. The only landing spot that's unless you say the Giants, but I don't know if the Giants are going to go there, is Denver. But I don't know if I think Peyton wants to get his own guy. I think Peyton wants his own guy. And I'm surprised you haven't mentioned this yet, Lindsay Rhodes.
What, Sam Darnold?
They won't trade him to the Vikings because it's in the division. And now Sam Darnold, at least right now, the Vikings are probably going to draft JJ McCarthy or move up or do something.
We're going to do it again, you guys.
Sam Darnold could end up being the damn quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings with the most talent he's ever had in a pass-happy offense. So I'm going to give the floor to you. First, 2 questions. One, if Sam Darnold is the Vikings starting quarterback,
is
he draftable? And where would you draft him? And number two,
yeah,
if Sam Darnold is the starting quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings, how much do you downgrade Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, or do you not downgrade them? Is Jefferson still your number one wide receiver if Darnold's throwing on the ball?
Okay, that's an interesting conversation. Let's talk about other wide receivers. Let's just, is there another wide receiver that we have taken highly that has had worse than average quarterback play?
Devontae Adams last season.
That's what we're metabolizing here. Like it's possible that Sam Darnold will be fine, right? Like that's the other conversation that we'll get to in just a second. But let's say he's not. Then what does that look like? Well, Garrett Wilson's another good example, right? Garrett Wilson, who's a high-end wide receiver who just we haven't seen it with the quarterback.
Right.
Yet.
Well, we thought we were going to get it last year, and then Rodgers got hurt after 4 snaps. Yeah.
Well, 100%, but I'm saying we haven't seen it. So
right.
if Garrett Wilson has done what he has done in fantasy with poor quarterback play, then would you say that is likely the floor for Justin Jefferson?
Well, but
if Sam Darnold's not good?
If Justin Jefferson's floor is Garrett Wilson, that's bad. Justin Jefferson is a bona fide top 3 wide receiver in fantasy. If you're talking about a floor of Garrett Wilson, that's not even top 15. That's not even top 20. That would be awful. So, listen, I don't have a lot of faith in Sam Darnold, but this might be his chance to prove everybody wrong because, he's been with 3 teams in the last 4 years, or this is his 4th team in 5 years. I just don't have a lot of faith in him. I think the Vikings need to do something else. Maybe bring in a quarterback in the draft, and then Darnold becomes the bridge. But yeah. I do have a little bit of concern about Justin Jefferson. He's bananas good. When Nick Mullins was the quarterback, he was still putting up pretty good numbers. But can he be consistent in that without Kirk Cousins?
Look, the thing about Sam Darnold, and you know exactly where I'm going here, but I just think it's a valid conversation. And I even feel self-conscious about the fact that it continues to be the same point. Because there have been years where I was like, look, I'll stop saying it at the end of this year. But then at the end of that year, all of the facts that made me say it at the beginning of the year remained true, which is he's never been in a situation where the coaching was good, where the offensive line, where he had protection, where he had weapons. He has never been surrounded by a good offensive situation. Never. Not once in his career when he's had a chance to play. Obviously, he was in San Francisco this past season. He got in for a half. You know what I mean? He played mop-up duty and hardly played at all. And, it would have been very interesting to see for purposes of projection in Minnesota if Brock Purdy had not been able to play for one game, or some extended period of time. If we'd seen Sam Darnold in that offense, I think we'd have a better idea. But I think that there's a reason that teams are willing to give him another shot and still believe in the skills and think that he's just been kind of not misused, but sort of in bad situations. So we've just never seen him at his best. And I think Baker's the perfect example last year of how different that can look. If you finally end up in a situation where, the coaching is competent and the pass catchers are, in his case, more than competent. And I think that that's certainly going to be the case for Sam Darnold. I think he steps into an offense here where we kind of have a rough idea of what it's going to look like. And Justin Jefferson, the best in the business. Jordan Addison proved last year that he is a highly competent wide receiver too. TJ Hawkinson, if he's healthy, gives you a great tight end to throw the ball to. Now that they have Aaron Jones, I very much like the backfield. And we'll get to that conversation. So I think that this is it. This is it, you guys. This is the last chance.
Great song, by the way, from back in the day. Make no mistake who you are. All right, go ahead.
If he gets a chance to play and they don't make a big move at quarterback, which I think is not off the table in the draft, but if he's the guy for this year as a bridge or otherwise, then this will be the time that we finally get our read of Sam Darnold. So we can put that conversation to bed, for better or for worse. But from a fantasy standpoint, I think he's not a guy anyone's going to be interested in drafting. So he'll be like a late round draft where you get him as a QB2. Nobody's going to feel comfortable drafting Sam Darnold, right, as their QB1. So sure, collect him, put him on your bench and then wait and see. And he's somebody that I certainly will do that with because I believe in him, I think, more than most.
Yeah, you do. USC honk. Speaking of the Vikings, though, like Aaron Jones found a job wicked fast, right? I mean, the Packers said goodbye. By the way, Josh Jacobs, I don't think his value goes up significantly because it was already, to me, he's still an RB1.
Pretty high.
So, to me, it was always an RB1 last year. He had the holdout and he had the injury and blah, 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 blah. Now he's in Green Bay. That offense is sick. Like,
it's a much better situation.
Sick. So, great situation. So, Jacobs, to me, was an RB1. He's still an RB1. Moves up a few spots probably. But in Minnesota, like Aaron Jones, I mean, I like the move because, he'll take over for where Madison was. But like Aaron Jones was lousy until the second half of the season.
He was hurt.
And then he went nuts. Right, but he played, but that's part of it too, Lindsay. At 30 years old, like he's going to be 30, I think, in December. Like durability is an issue with him, and so Ty Chandler is in the mix as well. So I don't, and plus, like I mean, the good thing is that even if Sam Darnold is crap, you can't stack the line of scrimmage because Justin Jefferson and Addison and Hockenson will kill you. So that's a good thing for Aaron Jones. But I don't know that we're going to get like Aaron Jones was awesome in the playoffs and late in the year. He had 5 straight 100-yard games. I don't know that we're going to get that in Minnesota. I think I don't even think he's an RB2 in Minnesota. I think he's probably a high flex starter.
Really?
For me. I think it's probably like a high flex. I worry about the durability and the age. And again, last year, his numbers were not late in the year. He was awesome. Mm-hmm. I mean, I will take another. He was fantastic, but he was barely remember every week we were talking about, God dang it, what do I do with Aaron Jones? He's killing me. AJ Dillon was he sucked too, but look at the numbers. In his first 7 games, he did nothing, right? He failed to score double digits in 5 of 7. And then he got hot at the end of the year. Maybe he got a little bit healthier. Still a good back, don't get me wrong, but I don't know if I want Aaron Jones as more than a low 2 or a high flex. I don't know if I want that. Minnesota's a team that's going to throw the football a lot. And to be honest with you, and I know their defense should be a little bit better, but are they got a team that's going to have to ban in the run, especially if Sam Darnold's their quarterback? I don't know.
Wait, they're going to throw the ball a lot, but I mean,
he's a good pass catcher.
Not enough.
You got Jefferson and you got Addison, you got Hockenson.
Right, but I mean, look at last year. So you're looking in the last 3 games of the year. Let's say he had 21 rush attempts, 20 rush attempts, 22 rush attempts. You could do that in Minnesota. You don't think the volume's even going to be there?
No, I'm not saying the volume is not going to be there. I don't know that level of production is going to ever be there again for Aaron Jones. He went through, how I talk about the magical season? That was a magical stretch run for him that is probably not going to be duplicated. And, his yards per carry was still 4.6, but the year before it was 5.3. Year before that it was 4.7. The year before that it was 5.5. So this is his lowest yards per carry average since 2019. Again, I'm not saying he's not going to be a good back. I just worry about the durability, and I worry about he'll have 2 great games against Green Bay. He's going to be pissed off and playing the Packers. But I don't know that I want Aaron Jones as. I think I'm worried about the durability. I don't want him as more as a low 2 or a high 3.
He's the nicest, happiest guy. I can't picture him walking on that field and just being
the analysis, whatever the analysis,
whatever it looks like when you're pissed off at a team. I think I'm a little bit higher on him and this move than you are. I think what we saw last year with Aaron Jones and the durability concerns are real, and he's getting older, and so we'll continue to have those. That's something you got to factor in. But let's say it was just an injury that he had last year and they kept him off the field, and certainly it impacted his play when he was on the field. We had games where he had, against the Chargers, he had 4 rush attempts. He had 8 rush attempts in week 7. He had 7 rushes. I mean, you're not getting,
because he was hurt. Yeah. Because
100%.
That's what I'm worried about.
And then at the end of the year, when he wasn't hurt, he was a huge key to that offense.
Yeah.
Like if you went and you looked at the advanced stats for Jordan Love's play for the offense as a whole, it was like when Aaron Jones was healthy, once he came back and he was able to be the guy that we were looking for him to be all season long, that's when the offense spiked. So I think he can still do it. Will he do it consistently? I think that that's a fair question, but I think I like him. And if you're saying that he's going to be more in the flex starter range, then that's something I'm interested in.
Yeah, I high to low flex depending on, or I'm sorry, low to high flex depending on the size of your league.
All right. Is there anyone at running back that we haven't discussed here? We talked about Jacobs, Packers.
I mean, we already talked about Zach Moss a little bit. We talked about Singletary. Tony Pollard, we were only to talk about. I don't love the move for Tony Pollard to Tennessee because I like Tajay Spears. And I don't see this as a lateral move. I think this is a downgrade for Tony Pollard. He'll probably be drafted as an RB2. And okay, I'm fine with that. And the offense is going to be completely different under Brian Callahan. Now, Derrick Henry, that era is going to be over. But I don't love the spot. I think Tajay Spears, based on where he's going to be drafted, could be a better value than Pollard based on where he's going to be drafted. Yeah.
Okay,
well, because Pollard's going to go ahead of Spears, no question.
Paint a picture for me about what you think that running back backfield looks like.
I think
who does what?
I think it could be a 60-40. I like Spears a lot. And the Titans are really lacking playmakers, right? I mean, Treylon Burks hasn't worked out. Chig, maybe he'll be okay. DeAndre Hopkins is no spring chicken. And so, like, they need playmakers. They need to get these guys on the field. I wouldn't be surprised if Pollard and Spear were on the field at the same time in different sets. But I'm a big fan of Tajay Spears. And I know that Pollard, came back from the injury and he was better in the second half. 100% agree. Totally on board with that. I just don't love the landing spot. I just feel like Tajay Spears is going to eat into some of that workload. And there's going to be weeks where Pollard's going to be good. And there's going to be weeks where Spears is going to pop.
When you say 60-40, you're saying 60 in favor of Tony Pollard.
Yes. Right.
And 40 for Spears.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. I think I felt similarly to you on that one, in that I wanted Tajay Spears to have more volume. I thought that he was a big breakout candidate, and this obviously neuters those expectations. Naeem Hines is going to the Browns on a 1-year, $3.5 million deal. Cowboys are still looking for a running back. I think I agree with you that we're looking at the draft now. Raiders have Zamir White, and then probably hit up the draft. With regard to the quarterback position, we talked about Sam Darnold. Jacoby Brissett goes to the Patriots. To me, that means that they are drafting a quarterback at number 3. Do you read that? So. Like, you're not bringing.
You would think so. Yeah, but I mean, maybe the Patriots make a move for Justin Fields and then they draft Marvin Harrison. I don't know. Possible.
Maybe, but then why bring in Jacoby?
To be a backup.
And then get rid of Bailey Zappi, who you already have as a backup under contract?
Bailey Zappi. Blech.
No, I mean, I understand. I'm just saying, why make that move if you're interested in Justin Fields? That doesn't seem to me like a move that you would make, paying somebody $8 million, which isn't a lot for a quarterback, but it's still $8 million. I mean, that's for crying out loud. That's like what these running backs are making, which goes back to my point of, we saw yesterday a lot of people who I respect and continue to see today, people saying like, what a day for the running backs. And I guess, so much for them being devalued. I don't see it that way necessarily, because the numbers are still depressed. I think that the reason that we saw so many sign on the first day is because there's competition for these jobs. And I think that they kind of know what the market is at this point. They're not holding out. Last year, it was a relatively bad free agency crop, right? Like Miles Sanders got, like $6 million. And that was like the highlight of free agency. That's not what this year's class was. Certainly there are people here who are going to find landing spots. And I think that they were somewhat motivated to get those landing spots quickly because there were so many other people fighting for those landing spots. And by the way, then vacating the spots that they were leaving behind. So I think that there were a number of teams that had bell cow running backs vacate their jobs, and then they needed different people to fill them. So I think that there are a lot of reasons why there would be early movement in the running back market that wouldn't necessarily indicate that everybody like values the running back position. And we've all been wrong about the devaluation there. I mean, looking at some of these numbers, we haven't talked about wide receivers because none of the high end wide receivers have signed yet. But Gabe Davis went to Jacksonville for more money. Yeah, Gabe Davis making, $39 million over 3 years. Mooney making the exact same amount of money. These are better paydays that these guys are getting, and they're guys that we don't really even necessarily we're not that excited about at the wide receiver position. They're making more money than the highest end free agent running backs. So I think that that's something to keep in mind. All right, we'll be back on Thursday with whatever moves are made between now and then. Thank you so much for listening to the Believe Fantasy Football Show presented by Bet Online. From Michael, Fabiano, I'm Lindsay Rhodes. Please join us again on Thursday. Like and subscribe. Do all of the things so more people can find our content. We appreciate you listening, and we'll be back again on Thursday.